Hello, everyone. Welcome to Yulio Jump Week, and thank you for joining me for the Yulio Jump for CET webinar. My name is Nicole. I'm one of the client success specialists here at Yulio, and I'll be hosting today's session. The main objective of today's webinar is to introduce you to rendering for virtual reality using the Yulio extension for CET. We'll focus on establishing a practical CET to VR workflow and explore how integrating VR into your presentations can truly enhance your client experience. This training will cover a lot of information, so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to enter them in the question box, and I'll answer them during the question and answer period at the end of our session. I also have my contact details on the screen now, so if you'd like to follow up on today's webinar with any questions or additional support, please feel free to reach out to me. Lastly, if you do have to leave today's session early, I am recording the full webinar and will send that to all registrants, so you'll be able to finish watching it later and you can share it with your team as well. So here's our agenda for today's session. We'll start off by going over how to install the extension in CET. Next, I'll cover how to prepare your model in CET and render with Yulio Jump. Once we render our project, I'll show you how you can view and edit your project in Yulio, and we'll finish off with that question period, like I said. So for those of you that are new to Yulio, Yulio Jump is our cloud-based rendering engine that can render your files in minutes while auto-applying navigation and lighting enhancements to turn your design into a VR-ready experience. From there, your clients can explore your design from a VR headset or from their computer, phone, or tablet. To begin rendering with Yulio Jump, you need to start off by installing the Yulio for CET extension, which can be downloaded directly from the Configure Marketplace. The extension is free to download. However, in order to use it, you must have an active Yulio license. With the Yulio extension, you can render the files you need for VR, as well as 2D image renders, which you're likely already familiar with. So here's an example. On the left, we have our typical 2D render. Each of these were rendered out of Yulio Jump. And then on the right is an equi-rectangular image that will be used to create our VR experience. So today I'm going to show you how you can render both types of files with the Yulio extension. All right, so once installed the extension, you can go ahead and open CET and start preparing your model for rendering. So here's the model I'm working with today. And at this point, it's pretty much ready to be rendered. So when it's your turn to prepare your model for rendering, you're going to want to think about a few key things. First, for a virtual reality experience, we recommend creating a fully enclosed building shell with 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. This is because when rendering for VR, your clients are not only seeing what's right in front of them as they would with a 2D render. In VR, your client will be able to fully explore your space. So having a building shell environment will give them a more realistic and immersive experience. The Yulio Jump rendering engine is also optimized to work best in these types of environments. So we know that creating a building shell can, in some cases, take more time than you have. So we do have a folder of resources that you can download, which includes a CET file of a building shell environment that you can use to show off typicals. And that's available on the project resources page on our website. So you can access that by going to our website, yulio.com, from the resources tab dropdown, selecting project resources. And then if you scroll down, you'll find this download here that includes the building shell along with some other assets. So in addition to that, if you're on a dealer plan or an enterprise plan with Yulio, we have additional building shell files available for you. So if you need help accessing those, you can reach out to me later and I can point you to them. All right, back to CET. The next thing you're going to want to consider before you render your project for VR is lighting. So, Yulio Jump was designed to simplify the rendering process as much as possible and take complexities like lighting off your hands. So, Yulio for CET has two primary methods for lighting your space and four different lighting options to choose from. So, let's start with method one. This method uses native CET lighting to light your space. So, this method of lighting your space will provide the most realism. However, it does require a little more work on your part and will require basic knowledge of the CET lights extension. To use this model, you'll place lights throughout your space. When you render with Yulio Jump and select the CET native lighting model, our rendering engine will acknowledge them as light sources, meaning the lights will be on. With this method, another thing you can take advantage of is HDR environment mapping, which allows you to add an environment outside of any windows in your design for added realism. Now, method two requires very minimal work on your part because it uses a smart ambient lighting model to light your scene. So, with this method, you would use Yulio Jump's interior or exterior lighting models, which don't require you to add any of your own light sources to your space. If you do add any lights to your space, Yulio will acknowledge them as objects. However, no light will be coming from them. Instead, your light source will be generated from Yulio's smart ambient lighting. I'll go into the specifics of each model and how you can show examples a little later on. Excuse me 1 minute. My dog is barking in the background. I'm just going to close the door. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so like I said, I'll go into the specifics of each lighting model a little bit later, and I'll show you examples of those lighting models. But while we were on the topic of preparing your model for rendering, your light source is something to keep in mind. All right, so once you've placed any optional lighting components into your space and finalized the rest of your model, the next step is to open PhotoLab. PhotoLab is where you'll set up your camera views for VR and your 2D images. So I'm going to start off by going over how you'll set up your camera views for VR. Let's just open PhotoLab here. So when creating a project for VR, you can think of your project scenes as different camera views that are set up around your space. So including more than one scene in your project will help your client explore the full scope of your space by allowing them to move to different areas in the space. So, before you start setting up your scenes, I recommend you think of the journey that you want your viewer to take as they move throughout your VR project. From here, you can sort of plan out a route. For example, do you picture them entering at the front and moving clockwise throughout the space, or in a straight line from front to back? Think of how they might actually move through the space if they were physically present. So, as you can see here, I've already set up a couple of camera views. The number of camera views, or what we call scenes, you create will vary from project to project. Smaller spaces may only require 3 to 4 scenes, versus larger spaces that may require 10 plus scenes to fully showcase the space. Again, when you're setting up your camera views for VR, you want to keep in mind the viewer experience and how you want your viewer to move through the space. So, to add a new camera view, I'm just going to select this new button here. And apologies in advance. My computer will probably run a little slow while I'm doing this, so just bear with me. So this one, after pressing that new button, it'll create a new view for you to place your camera. So I'm going to adjust my camera now to set my third view, which will translate to the third scene in my VR project. All right, so here's an important tip when you're placing your camera views for VR. You're going to want to place your camera in your ideal position and then zoom in slightly. So the camera position that I have here is what I want. This I've set it up in the right space that I want, but I'm going to want to set that position and then zoom in slightly. So it might look a little bit funny, but we recommend that you do this because after you render for VR and you go to view that scene, it will always appear more zoomed out than you expect. So, in order to capture the view that you truly want, you're going to want to place your camera in the ideal position and then move closer. So, from here, I'm just going to use my pan tool and just move a little bit closer. Another step that we recommend you take in Photolab is adjusting your camera elevation. So we recommend setting your camera height for each view to about 5 foot 6 because that's an average standing height. So I think that's about 1.7 meters. However, you can get creative with it and raise your camera height up to create a bird's eye perspective, or you can even lower it down to a seated position over a chair, for instance. Today, I'm just going to keep my camera elevation at 1.7 meters, which, like I said, is around 5 foot 6. And that's it. So you'll continue to repeat these steps depending on how many scenes you'd like in your VR project. Today, I'm just going to keep 3 scenes. All right, now I'm going to change direction for a minute to talk about 2D image renderers. So you can actually set up your views for 2D images in the same file here if you'd like. So you'll notice that when you go to render with the Yulio extension, you'll be able to select or deselect which photos you render. So if you've added camera views for VR and 2D images in the same file, at the time of rendering, you'll be able to choose which views you render depending on if you're rendering for VR or 2D. So in Photolab, you'll set up your camera view for 2D the exact same way I just did. The only difference is you don't have to zoom in after placing your camera. So once you create your new view, simply place your camera exactly where you want it, and then the view that you see in this Photolab window here will accurately reflect what is captured in your final 2D render. All right, so like I said, I've captured all the views that I want in this project. Before moving on, I do just want to mention that when you create new camera views in Photolab, by default, they will be labeled Photo 1, Photo 2, Photo 3, and so on. If you would like to customize the name, you can right click on the photo and then select Rename. So we recommend doing this if you want to provide some context and be able to more easily identify each of your scenes in Yulio once your project has rendered. I would also recommend renaming your views if you set up camera views for VR and 2D in the same file, just to help you distinguish between them when you go to render. Okay, moving on. If you remember earlier, I mentioned that if you select the CET native lighting model when rendering with Yulio Jump, you have the option to add an HDR environment outside of any windows in your project for added realism. So these extra steps also take place in Photolab, so I'm going to go through that now while we have Photolab open. So from the left side panel, you're going to start out by scrolling down and selecting the Simple button. From here, you're going to navigate to, and select the realistic box. And then you're going to select the thumbnail image under background. So this is where you can download any HDR images that you wish to use for your project. To avoid running into any issues, we do recommend that you use the images available here in CET. So once you've downloaded the image you want to use, you are going to scroll back down and return to the advanced controls. Something I like to note here as well that each HDR environment will emit different types of light based on the environment you select. So, for example, a bright snowy landscape might emit a brighter light than a green space. So that's something to keep in mind when choosing your background image. From here, you're going to go to the Lighting and Shadows tab, and then select Image-Based Light from the drop-down menu. Please note, Image-Based Light is the only lighting model on this menu that is compatible with Yulio Jump. So under the Image-Based Light panel, you're going to click on the thumbnail to select which background you would like to use. I already have this one selected here. And then you're going to make sure this is checked off, Used Image as Background. Once that's done, you are ready. Your HG environment has been applied to this view. Now, if you've already created multiple views in Photolab for your project, like I have here, you will need to go through each view and repeat those steps to apply the HDR background to each view. So ideally, before you create all of your views in Photolab, if you're planning to apply an HDR background, we recommend creating your first view in Photolab, applying that HDR environment, and then creating the rest of your views from there so that the HDR environment gets auto-applied as you create new views. All right, so that will wrap up our steps in Photolab, and our changes here are saved automatically. So I'm just gonna close this. So the next thing I want to talk about is AR tagging. So if you don't already know, Yulio offers fully automated augmented reality publishing direct from CET. This is an optional enhancement to your VR project that lets you incorporate AR hotspots into your VR experience. For your clients, this means that they can see project elements like furniture in full 360, and they can use their VR headset, phone, or tablet to see how the element can look and fit in their actual physical space. So, for those of you that are unfamiliar with AR, I'm going to go back to my slides for a minute to show you what this can look like. So, here's my colleague Dana opening an AR model on her tablet, and she's going to place it as an overlay on her physical environment. You can also do this from your phone as well. So, she's just scanning the room with her tablet, and then you'll notice that that AR model will drop into the space on her screen. And from here, she can rotate it and scale it and walk around it. And I'm just going to show you what this experience now looks like from within a VR headset. So again, you can drop that model into your physical surroundings and then lift it up, rotate it, position it, um, and even walk around it and get close to it. Okay, let's return to CET now. So to export AR assets and have them be created as hotspots in your VR project, you must first tag the items in your model using Yulio's AR tagging convention. So to do this, start by clicking on the Tools menu and then select Part Tagging from the dropdown. From here, we recommend creating a new category called AR so that you can keep all of your AR tags in one place. As you can see, I already have my AR folder here, but I'll just create a new one. So you're going to select New Category, label that AR, or I'll name it Augmented Reality just to distinguish. Next, you're going to select the New Tag button and enter Yulio's AR tag in the label box to create your AR tag for your item. So from here, select New Tag. So Yulio's AR tag for CET is hashtag YulioAR plus the object name. So for example, your tag could be hashtag YulioAR plus office chair. The only requirements that you have to remember is to use the hashtag YulioAR and don't include any other special characters in your tag name. So today I'm going to tag this bar stool over to my right. You can't see it right now, but I'll show you after. AR plus bar stool. So next, you're going to assign the tag to an item in your drawing. So to do this, select the Tag Individually option. Actually, let me move over so I can see my bar stool. So tag individually, and then select the bar stool. So the item will highlight in that tag color when it is added. You can tag one single object, like I've done here, just the chair, or you can tag a group of objects. So for instance, you can tag the chair and the desk here. Let me just move over. I can tag that chair and the desk here as one model, and it will export as a single model. To remove an item from your tag, you can just click on the item. Oops, tag individually, and then remove from selection. All right, once you're done, you can exit that part tagging menu. If you want to add additional items or tag additional items for AR, you can repeat those steps. So at this point, we are ready to render with Yulio. So to begin, you're going to navigate to the Yulio extension in CET. Our extension looks like this. Sometimes it can show up at the bottom of your list here, so we recommend pinning it to the top, which I've done. From here, you're going to select the Render Now button to open up your render settings. So the first time you render with Yulio Jump, you will be prompted here to enter the email address associated with your account just to verify your Yulio license. Once you've gone through those verification steps, you'll come back to the Yulio extension in CET and select that Render Now button again. This time, the Yulio Jump extension will pop up like this. So here are all the render settings that I can apply, and I'll just take you through them one by one. So first here we have our company. Most of the time you only have access to one company in Yulio, so you can ignore this. Next we have the render with option. This is where you'll select to render with Yulio Jump or Yulio Jump Perspective. So Yulio Jump is what you'll use to create a VR project. That project will process and upload directly to your Yulio account once it's finished rendering. Yulio Jump Perspective is what you will choose if you are rendering those 2D perspective images. So if you render with Yulio Jump Perspective, your images will be sent directly to the email associated with your Yulio account. Today, we're just going to, of course, render with Yulio Jump to render our VR project. Next, we have lighting models. This is where you can select the lighting model you'd like to render with. I touched on this earlier in the webinar, but I'm going to take some time now to go over these models in more detail. So when you go to render with Yulio Jump, you'll see 4 lighting model options available. We have CET native lighting, neutral materials, interior/shaded, and exterior/bright. I'm going to open a sample project now just to show you how these different lighting models can look depending on your space. All right, so here's the model we've been working with in CET. This version was rendered with the CET native lighting model, this version that you're looking at right here. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to use the CET native lighting model, you will have to place lighting into your space using the CET Lights extension. This can include fluorescent lighting, ceiling lights, sconces, floor lamps, and so on. I'm not going to go over how to place and adjust CET lighting today, so if that's something you're interested in learning about, Configura has some great learning resources available on their website, or you can reach out to their customer support team for additional help. Once your lights are placed in your model and you go to render with the CET native lighting model, Yulio Jump will acknowledge them as light sources, and they will appear on, as you can see in this model. So my space is being lit from the light sources that were placed in my model. Now, I also mentioned earlier that when you use this lighting method, you can take advantage of HDR environment mapping, which allows you to add an environment outside of your windows. So you can see here, if you look outside of this large window, this is the background image that I applied, which creates a more realistic environment. Our next example here showcases the interior slash shaded lighting model. This model typically works best in an environment with few or no windows. Without having to add any lighting to your space, this model will produce an artificial light source and makes it so that the space will be as evenly lit as possible. So you don't need to place any lights in your space to use this model. If you do place lights, they will appear off. Next, we have the exterior slash bright lighting model. So this model typically works best in an environment with many windows or even a skylight. This model was created to simulate lighting that you would get from the sun, so it's more physically correct than the interior lighting model. This means any shadows and projection in your scene will look more realistic, as it's simulating how sunlight actually appears in a real world environment. Similar to the interior slash shaded lighting model, you don't need to place any lights in your space. If you do, they will appear off. Lastly, we have the neutral materials model. So this model will also use the CET lights extension to light your space. However, as you can see, this model actually strips all color and texture from your space and replaces it with neutral materials. This model was created specifically for those times when you want your client to maybe get a feel for the layout of the space or the configuration of furniture before focusing on color, material, and texture. Okay, now I'm going to return back to CET and continue going through the extension settings. So today I'm going to render with the native CET native lighting model. All right, our next setting here is where you'll select the folder within your Yulio account that you'd like the VR project to upload to. So you'll just click on the browse button and your folders that you have access to in your account will pop up and you can choose which one you want it to upload to. Next, we have photos to render. So this is where you'll select the views you would like to render that you set up in PhotoLab. So if you set up views in PhotoLab for both VR and 2D images, you can select or deselect those here depending on if you're rendering for VR or 2D. Today I'm just going to render all of the photos that I created or the views that I created. Next we have some project enhancement settings. So first one here is add floor plan. So by selecting this enhancement, Yulio will capture your floor plan during the rendering process and export it as an asset in your VR project. If you set up your VR project to include multiple views or scenes, location markers will be automatically added to your floor plan in Yulio, which your viewer will be able to use as another navigation tool. So this is a really great feature to add to your project. Next, we have add navigation hotspots. When you select this enhancement, Yulio will auto-generate navigational hotspots for your project so that your viewer can move scene to scene when viewing your VR project. Navigational hotspots are our form of point-to-point navigation, and that's what helps create that walkthrough experience. Finally, we have add AR models. You'll want to select this, of course, if there's any items in your design that you've tagged as AR. When you select this, Yulio will generate and insert those AR models into your VR project as an interactive hotspot. All right, so that's it for our settings. Once you've selected all your preferences, you'll simply click on this Create VR Project button, and your project will start processing and rendering. So the time to process and render will depend on the size and complexity of your project. To give you an idea, a smaller project like this one I have will process for about 20 seconds and then should only take about 5 to 10 minutes to render and upload to Yulio. As a reminder, Yulio Jump will render all of your projects in the cloud, meaning after your project processes for about 20 to 30 seconds, you'll be able to continue using CET and your computer as normal while the files render. Once your VR project has rendered and uploaded to your Yulio account, you'll receive an email notification to let you know. And if you rendered with Yulio Jump Perspective for those 2D images, you'll receive those files to your email where you can download them. So I've already gone ahead and pre-rendered this project earlier, so we don't have to wait for it to render. So I'm just going to go over to my Yulio account now and open that up. All right, so looking at this project here on the left, this is how your project will appear once it's rendered and uploaded to your Yulio account. If you click into your project, you'll land here on the Edit Project page. So this is where you'll see all of your project assets that you rendered with Yulio Jump, such as your scenes, AR models, and floor plan. So under the Scenes tab here, I can view all of the photos or scenes that I captured. Under the AR tab, you can see the bar stool that I tagged, as well as the side table that I tagged earlier. And then floor plan, under the floor plan tab, you can see the floor plan that Yulio captured and uploaded. You'll also notice some other additional tabs here. We have audio, images, and video. So you can include or upload additional enhancement assets here. And once you upload any additional assets, if you choose to, you can add them into your project through the hotspot editor. So that's this big blue button here. So when you open up the hotspot editor, this is where you can add any additional project assets to your project. So if you uploaded any video or images, you'd be able to see them here and then drag and drop them into your scenes. From here, you can also edit any of your navigation hotspots or AR models that were generated through Yulio Jump and placed in your project for you. Now, if you're not adding any additional enhancements, assets like audio or images, and if you don't want to make any changes to your navigation hotspots or AR models or anything, you can simply view your project straight out of Yulio Jump. So to do that, you would just click on this View in 360 button. So we'll start off by taking a look at our project in browser mode here. So browser mode just means that you're viewing the project from an internet browser on your computer, phone, or tablet rather than a VR headset. So while viewing in browser mode on a computer, you'll just click and drag your mouse to look around the scene. If you're using a touchscreen device like a phone, you can use your finger to drag along the screen to view the project. So as I'm looking around here, you probably notice the navigation hotspots as well as the AR models that we generated with Yulio Jump. If your project has navigation hotspots, you can click on them to navigate to a new scene and move throughout the space. So I'll click on View 2 here. And as you can see, I'm now in a different location, viewing the space from a different perspective. Now, if you have a floor plan included in your project, you can activate it by clicking on this floor plan button. It looks like a map here at the bottom of your screen. So here's that floor plan that I generated out of Yulio Jump. You can see that Yulio Jump automatically placed location markers on the floor plan that represent each of my camera views that I set up in CET. So this marker highlighted blue tells us where we're currently standing. And I can click on a different marker to move to a new scene. So we'll move to view 3. And again, I'm just viewing this project now from a new location. So the final thing I want to go over in this project is our AR hotspots and how you can view them. So you can view your AR hotspots on a phone, tablet, or computer. However, the best viewing experience for AR hotspots is, of course, on a VR headset. There we go. So here's our AR model. If you're viewing the AR hotspot or model on a computer like I am, really the only capabilities you have are to rotate the model in full 360. And then to get that full AR experience from your computer, you can select this AR button here. This will pull up a QR code that you can scan with your phone or tablet. When the link opens on your phone or tablet, the AR object will appear as a digital overlay, as you saw in the video that I showed you earlier. From there, you can view the object in AR, and you can rotate it, position it, walk around it, and so on. If you open the AR hotspot from a phone or tablet or from a VR headset, so if you're viewing this project, a project that has an AR model from your phone, tablet, or VR headset, you'll be able to view the AR model directly from that device without having to scan any QR codes. All right, the final thing I want to quickly talk about is VR headsets and viewing your Yulio projects from a VR headset. So, the VR experience is similar to the browser mode experience in that you'll have the same navigation tools available to you and you'll be able to activate all hotspots. What makes the VR project or the VR experience stand out is the unparalleled viewing experience. So, it's much more immersive and really creates the wow factor. In terms of compatibility, Yulio is compatible with the MetaQuest series of headsets. So, all of their current headsets offer great viewing experiences and they come at various price points. So, you can really choose based on your budget. If you have a Quest headset and you're interested or you're considering purchasing one, you can visit our knowledge base and learn a little bit more about how to connect the headset to your Yulio account and start viewing in VR. We have different articles that cover connecting a VR headset and viewing in VR. So I definitely recommend checking out our knowledge base. You can access that from our website under the resources tab. On top of this, we also offer some video tutorials on our YouTube channel. So you can find our channel on YouTube just by typing in Yulio VR in the search bar. Of course, if you ever need additional support, you can also always reach out to me with questions, or we can hop on a call and I can walk you through that setup process. All right, with that, our Yulio Jump for CET webinar is complete. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope that you were able to learn more about Yulio Jump and how seamlessly it can fit into your existing workflows. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the question box and I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes to answer those. As a reminder, if you want to book an additional training session with me on anything we did or didn't cover today, my email is up on the screen, so please feel free to reach out and I'll gladly work with you to set up a time for us to meet. Of course, you can also email me anytime if you have any questions that pop up later. I also just want to point out our webinar schedule is up on the screen as well. You can access that at try.yulio.com/webinars. We have a few different webinars scheduled for this fall that I think you would really like and be interested in. So I recommend you check those out. So thank you again for joining me. Like I said, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes to answer any questions. Other than that, have a great rest of your day.